Hi, everybody. This is the Chess Goals 1E4 course, Attacking from Strength. I'm Matt, and this is Jesse, and this is Chapter 1. We're looking at the Scotch game with 4 bishop to c5. How's it going, Jesse?
I am doing great. I am super excited for the E4 course. I have been a D4 player my entire chess career, which is like 4 or 5 years now, and I have literally just played E4 for the first time in, my whole life, and it's been super fun, and I'm loving the positions that I'm getting out of this course. So I'm excited to take a look. Also, chapter 1 is my favorite chapter of the whole course, so I'm very excited for chapter 1 in particular.
Well, I can't choose any chapter as a favorite, but I also started an E4 player. Well, I shouldn't say also. I started E4, switched to D4, and now I'm really enjoying going back to E4 again. It's a lot of fun. So in this first chapter, we're going to look at E4, E5. Do you see E5 most often in your games?
Yeah, I would say over half for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, as your rating goes up, maybe you'll start to see a little bit more Sicilians, but E5 is the most common move by quite a big margin at the club level. And that's why it's going to be 4 chapters in this course out of 10. So we're saying that you're going to see E5 approximately 40% of the time at the club level after E4. So here we're recommending knight F3. And after knight to C6, pawn to D4. This is called the Scotch game. So what are your thoughts on the Scotch?
Yeah, so it's an aggressive opening. You're immediately attacking everything in the center with the support of your knight. And it's not super common. So D4 is the third most common move here, at least at the master's level. At Same thing, I guess, with just like the club database. But third most common, and you see it about doing quick math here, 30% of the time, something like that. But a lot of time at the club level, they really don't know how to go about neutralizing this even. You're going to see a lot of inaccuracies early. And with the setup we're going to give, you get a very good attacking opportunity before black even knows what's happening. So I really like d4 here. And the main, what you're going to see almost all the time is e takes because this pawn is just kind of double attacked. So e takes, and we're going to play knight takes back. So there's a few options here after d takes. We decided this was knight taking is the most solid. Um, the gambity lines are fun, but it's pretty easy for black to neutralize if they know what they're doing. And you can also develop a bishop if you want, but we're going with knight takes d4.
Yeah, I think the Scotch has strikes a nice balance between kind of an attacking gambit system and a slower positional system. It really has the mix of both. Like black can't kill the game and get a quick draw like most of the gambit lines. We also get great attacking positions. So once I kind of went through all the different options after e4, I thought the Scotch game is the way to go. And so bishop to c5 here. This is the main move. This is called the classical variation. And knight to f6, we will look at next chapter. That will get its own chapter. And a surprisingly common knight takes d4 instead of bishop to c5. That'll be covered in chapter 3. That move is not so great, but we make sure to cover it because it's very popular. Now, this is where I think the fun starts. I researched a lot of different variations in the Scotch, and I decided to recommend move 5, knight to b3. This is called the Potter variation. And the idea is we're going to play bishop to e3, queen to e2, um, usually queen to e2 first, knight to c3, queenside castle, and then we're going to pawn storm the king side and go for an attack against the black king. And you've been using this in practice. What do you think of this system?
It's really fun and it's really great. I've had many games where I know like these first few opening moves, and in a 3 minute game, I'm up like a minute on the clock because black like doesn't even know what to do. But more than that, um, in the middle game, it's so easy to just push these pawns. Like it's such an easy plan, and it's so quick and so deadly. I really enjoy it.
And it's oftentimes harder for black to get their pawns going because the knight's in the way or the bishop's in the way on b6, so they don't get that
Mhm.
same pawn storm against our king.
Yep. So very often they're going to back the bishop here, bishop b6, and yeah, like Matt just said, these pawns are blocked. We're going queenside. They don't know that yet, but it's going to be really hard to reverse this pawn storm. Another like mini chess goals wrinkle here is queen e2. Um, we are pretty far down the opening tree at this point. Scotch Game is not played too often. Knight Takes isn't always played. Ponder Variation isn't always played. So we're very much in our court right here. And it's not like we've given up any eval or anything. We're not -1 or anything. And we have very fast moves coming. And so this is where it gets really fun.
Yeah, and I would guess that's probably why this is your favorite chapter. These are the most common moves for black, and we're playing completely in our court. These moves are rare enough that hopefully our opponents don't really know what we're doing. And at this point, we're going to look at 6 different options for black. And let's start with pawn to d6. This is by far the most common option, might even be seen about half the time from this position. And from here, we're going to recommend knight to c3, and our plan is to play bishop to e3 and castle queenside. And now we're going to look at 3 moves for black. Let's start with knight to f6.
Yep, and you're going to see a lot of these moves all the time in your games. And luckily for us, our moves don't change too much based on what black plays. A lot of time, we're going to go for the same type of setup. So almost always after they play d6, we're going to want to put our bishop on e3. There's only a couple lines in this chapter where our bishop doesn't come on e3, but they're kind of like tactical reasons that we'll get into. So here, there are 2 main moves, castles and bishop takes. Do you want to start with castles?
Yeah, let's start with castles. And now at this point, we're going to castle queenside. And here we're getting ready for the pawn storm. And you might be wondering what's happening with these bishops. We're not necessarily in a hurry to capture on b6. And if black captures on e3, that tends to help us out because we can move our queen to e3 and still get the pawn storm going on the king side. So now the most common move is rook to e8. And at this point, if you check the Stockfish evaluation, we're already up 1. So this is the main line of the whole course. This is the most common moves the whole way through for black. And we're already +1 according to Stockfish. That's a really good sign, I think. And here we recommend f3. Defends the pawn on e4, which was being double attacked by knight and rook. And at the same time, we're ready to play g4 and launch that pawn storm against the king. So now, most common move for black is bishop to e6. And what should we do here?
These moves are so hard for me because I don't know if you've seen my YouTube videos, but there's always a little decision you need to make about going for the pawn storm or taking a move to tuck your king away. The best way that I have found to remember it is if we're allotted the time, it's best to tuck the king away. So here, our pawn storm is coming really quick, but black is really nowhere to be found on their pawn storm. So let's take one move, play king b1, and we're going to go pawn storm in next move.
Yep. So we'll give black queen to e7, the most common move. And now pawn to g4, and here comes the attack. We want to play h4, we want to play g5, just get these pawns rolling up the board. And in the notes, I put that there's actually a game on YouTube in this variation. So that's another thing I'll mention. We started doing this with the Caro Kann course just recently. We are going to have sort of a live updated copy of all of our courses in Chess Studies. And those Chess Studies are going to actually link to our bonus content on YouTube. So if you're watching this video, that's something to look forward to. You will be able to have clickable links to go watch all the bonus content on YouTube. So now knight d7 is the most common move, and we're going to go ahead with h4. Now, what does black usually play in this position? So they see our attack coming. What do they tend to do?
Yeah, well, black probably knows, okay, we're castling opposite sides, probably good to pawn storm. Black only has 1 pawn to storm us with, so let's just throw a5 up the board. And it's a little tempting here. Yeah, so this king is, can get pushed around. Like this pawn is coming pretty quickly, actually. It's a little tempting just to push forward and trudge forward, but really we should take one move and just kind of stop the whole idea with a3. So now if there's a4, it can bring the knight towards the middle, something like that. And this move or this pawn can't come forward anymore. So that's good for us.
Yeah, that's a really key point. We don't want the black pawn to make its way to a3, and it was going to play a4 with a tempo. So at this point, after a3, a4 is the strongest move for black. But here, what are we going to play after a4?
So after a4, we don't actually have to play knight moving away right now, but we can actually trade off the dark square bishops here. So bishop takes b3. And that's a really good minor piece for black. And whichever way they take back, then we can move our knight out of the way, and then we can just play the h-pawn down the board.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And the other thing that black may try here is bishop takes b3, thinking, okay, I'm going to double your pawns. But this actually tends to help us having the c pawn here, because that's an extra defender, and that bishop on e6 was helping black attack. Right, so that knight on b3 was sort of in the way for us. So if you see bishop takes b3, like this eval is already plus 2.1. That's a good thing for us if they're going to take that knight.